The Escarzas hit one of ours last night. My nephew. Shot. Bleeding in the street like a stray dog. He lived, but that's not the point. Victor studied Raphael, whose jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. What's the point then? That they dared, Raphael growled. They sent a message. Victor nodded slowly. And you want to write back? City of Shadows. Chapter 1. Whispers beneath the pavement. The city of Laurent always looked asleep from the outside, like a worn cathedral at twilight, ancient and still. But within, it breathed in smoke and secrets. Its veins weren't streets, but alleyways, basements, old telephone lines, and whispered names. And on the eastern side of the city, where the rain always seemed thicker and the streetlights dimmer, a man like Victor Morano could still walk unnoticed. He had long ago learned to blend into the edges of the frame, a shadow who watched the lights flicker, waiting for the silence between footsteps. Victor wasn't part of the city's criminal families, at least not by blood. He was the man they called when blood had already been spilled, and no one wanted to admit whose hands were red. He understood power like a mathematician understood equations. He didn't chase it, but he knew exactly what would happen if the numbers changed. That morning, the call came at 4:17 a.m. It wasn't the ringtone that woke him, but the silence before it, a sudden vacuum in the night. He picked up on the second ring, a voice, low, controlled, female. Don Alberto wants to see you, now. Victor didn't need to ask why. Don't ask questions you already know the answers to. Rule number 1 in Laurent. The old family house. The Montello estate wasn't a house so much as a fortress in denial. Iron fences, ivy-choked balconies, windows that watched you like judgmental old men. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and old sins. Don Alberto Montello sat beneath an oil painting of his grandfather, hands clasped as if in prayer. The light from the chandelier carved deep lines into his face, turning age into authority. Beside him stood his son, Raphael, tall, angry, dressed in black as if mourning something that hadn't happened yet. Victor entered without ceremony. They touched blood, Don Alberto said, not even offering a seat. Whose? Victor asked. The Escarzas hit one of ours last night. My nephew. Shot. Bleeding in the street like a stray dog. He lived, but that's not the point. Victor studied Raphael, whose jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. What's the point then? That they dared, Raphael growled. They sent a message. Victor nodded slowly. And you want to write back? Echoes of a ghost, but even as he left the estate, something gnawed at the edges of Victor's instinct. The hit felt wrong, too sudden, too messy. The Escarzas were vicious, yes, but they were also calculated. This wasn't their style. He drove without direction at first, letting the rhythm of the city's dawn guide him. The streets were slick from the night's rain, reflecting the red of traffic lights like wounds. His car found its way to the South District, to a place where the city was older than its memories. There, in a crumbling tenement building above a shuttered pawn shop, lived Celia Marquez, a name that no longer appeared in any police record, but lived on in whispers. Celia had once run messages for 5 different cartels, 3 of which no longer existed. She knew how to disappear so well, it was said she could make a thought vanish. Victor knocked once, then twice. The door opened a crack. I heard you were dead, she said. Not yet. She let him in. Inside, the apartment was full of dust, incense, and silence. The walls were papered with maps, not of the city as it was, but as it had been. Tunnels, basements, sewage lines, and back doors. You didn't come here just to haunt me, she said. Victor nodded. Tell me what's moving in the dark. Celia hesitated, Her face shifted. Something passed behind her eyes. Fear or memory, maybe both. There's a name. It's come back. The kind of name you whisper to make sure it doesn't hear you. Whose name? Winter. Silence, thick and immediate. Victor frowned. That's just a myth. An old ghost story for gangsters. Celia shook her head. Number ghosts fade. He's growing stronger. The seed of chaos back outside, Victor leaned against his car, watching the street. The city didn't look any different. But it was. He could feel it. The way the tension curled behind every corner. The way silence seemed deeper. Winter. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade, and even then, only in fragments. Stories of a man who never left fingerprints, who made deals vanish and enemies vanish faster. He didn't take power, he rewrote the rules. Some said he didn't exist. Others claimed he ran the city from beneath it. Victor lit a cigarette and looked at the skyline. If he's back, he muttered, we're all already too late. Chapter 2. The Name That Freezes Blood. The early hours of the morning in Laurent were not meant for men like Victor Morano. They belonged to ghosts, to regrets, to the soft sighs of women who waited too long, and men who had nowhere left to go. In those quietest hours, just before the sun dared to rise, the city revealed its truest self, raw, feral, full of untold debts and whispered sins. Victor drove through that silence with his window down, the cold air slicing across his face like a reprimand. The streets were wet, gleaming like the backs of fish under streetlight glow, and the buildings, tired old things, loomed in on him as if hoping to swallow him whole. He didn't rush. The name Celia had spoken echoed too loudly in his head to allow peace. Winter. He remembered that name like a cold shiver at the base of the spine. He had only heard it once before, whispered between two dying men on opposite sides of a gang war that had burned for 14 months. It was never shouted, only whispered. A name that left your mouth colder than when it entered. And now that name was moving again through the city's veins, beneath the skin of Laurent. Victor turned off the main road and dipped into Fortello. Not a neighborhood, but a zone of secrets. Nothing had a label here. Everything was traded in code. You didn't buy things in Fortello. You bartered for access. The place smelled of mold and gasoline. Neon signs buzzed over shuttered bars, their flickering lights barely holding the night at bay. Victor slipped down a stairwell between two brick buildings and found himself in a place few outsiders ever saw. The pit. It wasn't really a market, not in the traditional sense. More like an open wound of the city, where men and women without names offered information like illicit fruit. And at its center, Victor found Leo. Leo used to count money for the Escarzas, back when they still believed numbers could protect them. Now he counted rumors and sold them at a premium. "You're asking about Winter?" Leo said as soon as Victor approached. He didn't greet, didn't smile, just stared. The way prey stares when it senses the hunter has teeth. "I'm asking about what's real," Victor replied. Leo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then you're in the wrong city. He's back, isn't he?" The man looked over his shoulder as if the name itself might be listening. "He never left," he whispered. "We just forgot how to look down." Victor leaned closer. "Tell me what he's building." Leo wiped sweat from his forehead, even though the room was freezing. "A new order, that's what they're saying. Not just territory, not just turf. Something bigger, more organized than Montello, more disciplined than Escarza. Controlled, almost religious." Victor narrowed his eyes. "Where is he?" Leo shook his head. "He doesn't have a where. He's not like the rest. He doesn't sit on thrones. He pulls wires. You don't find Winter, he finds you. Or he finds someone you love. and they disappear. Victor stood in silence. "Then I'll dig," he said simply, "until the ground gives him up." Fractures within the family. When Victor returned to the Montello estate, the entire house was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Guards were on high alert, voices raised behind closed doors. The attack on Don Alberto's nephew had shaken more than just family pride. It had cracked the illusion of control. Inside, Rafael Montello paced like a caged wolf. His leather gloves were clenched in his fists, and his eyes gleamed with a barely suppressed rage. "We go now," he barked. "They bleed us, and we sit here quoting proverbs." Victor stepped between Rafael and the doorway. "You go now, and you walk into a war you're not prepared for." "We are always prepared," Rafael shouted. "Not for this," Victor said evenly. "Not for someone who doesn't want territory, someone who wants to erase the board entirely." Don Alberto entered the room like gravity. "What did you find?" he asked Victor, ignoring his son. "A name," Victor replied. "One that shouldn't exist anymore." Don Alberto didn't flinch. "Winter," he said quietly. Victor nodded. "He's not just back. He's laying groundwork, turning your enemies into tools, setting fires you think are natural disasters." Raphael scoffed. "So what? We sit here while he builds?" "No," Victor said, walking to the center of the room. "You let him build. You let him believe he's unseen, and then you cut his throat in the dark. A body with no name. The next day, Leo was found dead, stripped, tortured. His face flayed and pinned to the wall above his corpse. A message carved crudely into the concrete. "Stop looking." Victor stood at the scene with a clenched jaw. The smell of burnt flesh and mildew made the air thick. Someone had gone to great lengths to make Leo's death mean something. "This wasn't for him," Victor murmured. "It was for me." And that meant one thing. Winter knew he was digging. A meeting underground. 2 nights later, an envelope was slipped under Victor's apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside, a folded scrap of paper and the faint scent of cigars. "You're trying to understand something too large for your frame. Come see the rest. 2 a.m., Marino Station, alone." Marino Station had been closed for years. Victor had passed it 100 times, never thinking it more than a forgotten echo of the city's past. But now, it was a threshold. He went armed. The tunnels were black with mildew, the air humid and wrong. Graffiti screamed from the walls in colors long faded. Somewhere in the dark, rats hissed. And then, a voice. "You don't have to fight it, Victor. The city was already rotting. I'm just helping it decompose." A man emerged from the shadows. Tall, face shadowed, but unmistakable. Presence like ice water, voice like slow poison. "Winter," Victor said. The man gave a slight bow. "Names are like masks. I wear many. You killed Leo. You lit the fuse." "I exposed the wound," Winter replied. "You think this is about turf wars and vendettas? I'm building a system that doesn't need surnames or bloodlines. No loyalty, just structure." The future Victor stepped forward. "And the bodies." "Collateral," Winter said softly. "Necessary, painful, but necessary." Silence filled the tunnel like fog. "You can walk with me," Winter said, his voice almost kind, "or be buried under the future." Victor didn't hesitate. "I'll see you in hell first." Winter smiled. "Oh, you'll see me long before then." And then he vanished, the tunnel empty once more. Victor stood there, heart thudding, breath sharp in his lungs. He had looked the myth in the eyes, and it had smiled at him. Now the war wasn't coming. It had already begun.